Welcome to part one of the No-Rise Analysis Training video series provided by the Kansas Department of Agriculture Division of Water Resources. My name is Ben Rufnaugh. I'm with WSP and I will be guiding you through this training. In this video, we will define the no-rise analysis. We will show when a no-rise analysis is required and when it may not be required. And we also talk about what the alternatives are when a no-rise cannot be shown. So the reason we have no-rise analyses is because of this statute under 44 CFR 60.3 D3 that communities adopt when they adopt new regulatory floodways that says basically any development that happens in a floodway has to be demonstrated through hydrologic and hydraulic analysis performed in accordance with standard engineering practice that it will not increase the flood levels within the community. And the key phrase here, the second half of this statute, is what defines the no-rise analysis. So the definition of a no-rise analysis is a hydrologic and hydraulic analysis performed in accordance with standard engineering practice that shows a proposed development would not result in any increase in flood levels within the community during the occurrence of the base flood discharge. So now to break down this definition a little farther, what does any increase in flood levels mean? So according to FEMA, any increase is zero increase. And they go down to the hundredth of a foot. 0.00 feet is what is required to meet no-rise criteria. Even 1/100th of a foot will not meet this criteria. So this is a very strict criteria. The reason this criteria is so strict is to prevent cumulative impacts from a bunch of developments that are allowed in a floodway. So if a community just keeps allowing these developments that each one increases the flood elevation by 1/10 of a foot, a small amount, this could over time lead to a higher increase in flood stage within the community. Okay, when is a no-rise analysis required? So a no-rise analysis is required for any development that makes changes within the designated floodway that could obstruct flood flows during a 1% annual chance storm event. So how does FEMA define development? Here in 44 CFR 59.1, development means any man-made change to improved or unimproved real estate, including but not limited to buildings or other structures, mining, dredging, filling, grading, paving, excavation, or drilling operations, or storage of equipment or materials. So as defined, developments that require a no-rise analysis include any less than substantial additions to buildings, storage of materials or equipment, permanent placement of fill, or new construction. All of these obstruct flood flows. So in this image on the right, we have a floodway, which is the red and blue striped area here. And here this black striped line here shows a levee. So we're on the river side of the levee here. And this orange and black is the X protected by levee area. This area right here is a building material storage facility. And then the area right here next to it is a yard waste facility. So both of these facilities are storing materials in the floodway. Here we're showing the same area, but we're showing the LiDAR terrain data here. So the white color here is high ground, and the blue color here is the river, the low ground. And as you can see here, these storage facilities stockpile pretty large piles of debris here. And if we look at the actual modeling for this area, it becomes pretty clear that these areas are impeding flow here. So these are a couple of examples of types of development that would definitely need a no-rise analysis in order to be allowed to be constructed. Are there any types of development that do not require a no-rise analysis? So communities can exempt some types of development that don't have an impact on flooding. So things that are built at grade don't actually change the grade and don't have a significant impact on flows. So some examples of this would be like in this photo, it's a community garden, and really any type of gardening or agriculture activity that doesn't change the grade should be fine. Any types of basketball courts or tennis courts where it's just a concrete pad poured at grade, those should all be fine. They're not changing, impeding flow in any way. Playground equipment is another example of something that doesn't really impede flow in any significant way. Soccer fields are fine. Baseball fields with fences that won't actually block any flow, and utility poles are other items that don't impede flow in a significant way. So walking paths built at grade can be fine. Now in this example, they built the walking path under a bridge opening here. So this would be fine as long as this doesn't change the flow capacity of the bridge opening. It doesn't change the grade in any way. But we need to make sure that they're not regrading that bridge opening and constricting flow more than it was before. Now here's another example of a walking path, but this walking path, they actually changed the grade here to account for the raise in these buildings to make sure that the buildings were elevated out of the floodplain. But in doing that, they changed the grade of this walking path. So that still needs to be checked to see that it doesn't cause any rise in the floodway. So there are some recreation facilities that we need to be a little more careful with. This is a skate park, which is, something that is a good thing to put in the floodplain. But this actually does change the grade of the area, as shown in the terrain here. That white area in the terrain data is the high area around that skate park. And if we look at the model flow through this area, it is impeding the flow. So this is something where a no-rise analysis should be required before they can build skate parks like this. And in another similar example, this is a BMX park. And if we look at the terrain here, we can see that that's also pretty substantial in the terrain. And we look at the modeled flow, and it does impede flow through this area. So a no-rise analysis would be required. Fencing, grandstands, these type of things can generally be exempt. There's more utility poles there. But actual buildings need to be careful with those do require a no-rise analysis. And back to the example of the baseball field, everything in this photo is fine, but if fences are generally okay as long as they're constructed in a way that doesn't impede flow, and it can even require them to break away during large flow events so that they don't get clogged up with debris and actually start substantially blocking flow. But then if we turn, look at the outfield wall of the same baseball field, and we can see that's a solid concrete wall. So a wall like that will impede flow and probably does need a no-rise analysis. And other substantial walls, so those chain link fences generally don't need no-rise analysis with them. But then there's this concrete wall built in addition to the fence there around this walking path, and that's substantial enough that it does require no-rise analysis. Now, new structures like bridge and culverts, you can exempt them if they are being replaced by a exact same structure, an identical structure. But in most cases, they're already going to be designing these things and running modeling for design purposes. So a no-rise analysis should be no issue there and should be ran anyway. And rarely are bridges replaced with identical structures. They're usually updated from previous designs in some way. And really, the main message here is if in doubt, you probably need a no-rise analysis. In this photo, we have a old steam engine that was placed right in the floodway. And so this is a pretty substantial block and flow. I mean, we would definitely require a no-rise analysis for much smaller additions to homes. So something like this should require a no-rise analysis. So does this mean that development cannot be completed in the floodway unless the no-rise criteria is met? And the answer is no. Communities do have the option to complete a full floodway revision as referenced in 44 CFR 60.3 D4. So a community can permit encroachments within the adopted regulatory floodway that would result in an increase in base flood elevations, provided that the community first applies for a conditional firm and floodway revision, fulfills the requirements for such revisions as established under the provisions of 6512, and receives the approval of the Federal Insurance Administrator. So going through this revision process is a much larger process than just simply completing a no-rise analysis. So no-rise analysis allows for development within a floodway without going through this letter of map change process. It's a much simplified process. If you're not changing the maps at all and you're just building something simple in the floodway and you just want to show that it's not going to impact flooding in any way, then you can just do that, submit it to your local floodplain administrator and the state, and when they sign off on it, that's all you have to do. If you want to go through the full floodway revision process, you have to go through the FEMA process. It has to go through a FEMA official reviewer. These review comment periods, they have 90 days for each round. And then you have 90 days to address the comments for each round. And then after the revision is issued, you have to go through an appeal period and due process, and you have to notify any landowners that are impacted by these changes. And they all get a chance to appeal this before the actual change can go effective. So this is a long and substantial process, and so it's much easier just to do a no-rise analysis with no map change. And as a final point for this video, you should always ask yourself, can this project be moved out of the floodway? Does this development actually need to be in the floodway, or can I make a simple change, move it just a little bit and get it out of the floodway? Is there a good alternative that we can look at that will avoid the floodway? So that's your best and easiest course of action, is just to avoid the floodway. So in conclusion, no-rise analyses are used to reduce the chances of continued development in the floodway that increase flood issues through a community over time. So we're trying to prevent these cumulative impacts of small projects. Any development in the floodway that could impact flood elevations in any way, if there's any question about it, these need to perform a no-rise analysis to prove that development will not impact flood elevations. And communities can make exceptions for minor projects that will not impact flood elevations. And there are alternative options for meeting the no-rise criteria. If a no-rise criteria can't be met, but a community does really want to move forward with some sort of development, then we can go through the letter of map change process. Now, these are mostly meant for beneficial improvements. So if you're building a flood control project, that would be something that is beneficial. That actually reduces flooding in the community overall. These are the types of things that you'd want to use a letter of map change for, and actually go through the floodway revision process. So if there are any questions or you're looking for more information, you can contact the Kansas Department of Agriculture Division of Water Resources Water Structures Program at the number or email address shown here. You can also go to their website that's listed here for any general information or to find more contact information.